All right, guys, this is Chapter 2, Section 1A. We're going to be splitting Section 1 into 2 days. So let's start with some vocab. A declarative statement, as some of you may know from English, is just a statement that is clearly true or false. So I could say, the sky is blue. That would be a declarative statement because it's clear to see that that statement is true. Or I can say, the grass is purple. That would also be a declarative statement. It's a false declarative statement, but it's still a statement that we can easily say is true or false. All right, a conditional statement, which is kind of what this first half of the chapter really bounces off of, is a logical statement that has two parts put together. It has a hypothesis and a conclusion. It is written in if-then form, and this will make sense after we do some examples. Or it could also be said that P implies Q, but mathematically it's P arrow Q. So this we would say if P, then Q. Okay, this what I circled here is what we'll see most often in this class. And this will make more sense after we do a little bit with it. All right, so the hypothesis is the first part of the conditional statement, and it is the if part. So if hypothesis, okay? And the conclusion of a declarative statement is the then part. So the hypothesis will be in the first part, the conclusion will be in the then part. So for example, if my hypothesis is it is raining and my conclusion is it is cloudy, first I want to note that both of these are declarative statements. Okay, this only works for two declarative statements. So conditional statements, so if you look here, my P comes first. So it is raining comes first, but we want to put this in if-then form. So I would say, if it is raining, comma, so if it is raining, that's my P, implies Q, so here's my Q, it is cloudy, so if it is raining, then it is cloudy. All right, so now let's look at example 1. So all of these here are conditional statements, and the reason I know, here's the if and the then, here's the if and the then, so on and so forth. They all have an if and a then. All right, so if P, then Q. Now I want you to think the hypothesis always comes before the conclusion. So hypothesis always comes before conclusion. Okay, so if I wanted to circle the hypothesis and underline the conclusion, now I want you to realize that the if and the then is not part of the hypothesis and conclusion. If you were to write if and then on a test or a quiz, I would count some points off. So I'm just going to go X out the if and the then on all these just to make sure I don't use them. Okay, so hypothesis comes before the conclusion, and we're going to circle the hypothesis. So if today is Sunday is the hypothesis, it is the weekend is the conclusion. So what I circled and what I underlined, if I would say it by itself, it's a declarative statement. Okay, so let's look at 2. If I have a red fruit, so I have a red fruit would be my hypothesis, then, oops, I have a strawberry would be my conclusion. All right, I want you to do 3 and 4 on your own. It should only take you a second, and then we will come back and I'll give you the answers. All right, so on 3, you should have circled, I break my leg, and you should have underlined, I will have crutches. And on number 4, you should have circled, I get an A on my test, and you should have underlined, I will pass the test. We'll do several more examples of these as we go. All right, we have one more vocab word, and it's a very, very important one, and it is negation. Okay, so if you negate something, it means you like take it away or make opposite. So negation would be the opposite. I'm going to put opposite, kind of explain that here in a minute. The opposite of the original statement. And when we negate something, all we do is we put a squiggly in front of it. Okay, so for example, if my P is I'm wearing shoes, my not P would be the tilde P, or the squiggly P would be I am not wearing shoes. Okay, so this squiggly and this not goes hand in hand. All right, so for example, if my P is the ball is red, and I want to negate that statement, okay, so this squiggly here tells me I'm going to negate that statement. So the negation of the ball is red would be the ball is not red. So it's not the ball is blue or the ball is green or the ball is yellow. It's just the ball is not red, because that's what this squiggly, that's how we read it, is not P. Okay, so I'm going to pause this, and I want you to think about Q for a minute and think real hard and try to do it on your own, and then we'll go over the answer. All right, so the cat is not black. So this not here tells me the cat is not black. Some of you are like, not what? Well, if a cat is not black, that would mean the cat is black, right? If the cat is not black, that means the cat is black. Double negative is a positive. All right, let's look at example 2. So it says the sentences below are not written as conditional statements, but we want to write them as conditional statements. So if we look at this right here, it says all birds have feathers. Okay, so we want to separate this into 2 declarative statements and write it in if-then form. Now, at least for me, sometimes I think that finding the if P then Q is easier than just finding the P and the Q. Some people think that finding the P and Q alone is easier, but either way helps for you do it that way. So all birds have feathers. So that means that if I have a bird, then it has feathers. So I'm going to write that here. So my conditional statement would be if it is a bird, then it has feathers. Okay, if it is a bird, then it has feathers. Now, let's circle the hypothesis and underline the conclusion. Notice my if and then isn't circled or underlined. So the hypothesis then would be it is a bird. And my conclusion would be it has feathers. Now, I want you to do the second one on your own, or try to do it on your own, and then we will come back and go over it together. All right, so part B says you are in Texas if you are in Houston. Now let's think of cause and effect here. So if we're in Texas, does that mean we're in the city of Houston? No. Okay, but if we're in the city of Houston, does that mean we're in Texas? Yes. So my if P then Q, I'm going to say if we are in Houston, comma, then we are in Texas. Okay, so now I have it in conditional statement form. So I can circle my hypothesis, and I can underline my conclusion. Okay, so my hypothesis is just we are in Houston. And then my conclusion is we are in Texas. All right, guys, there's 4 of these that's written in conditional statement form, but kind of different that we really need to know for this class. So it's conditional, converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So conditional statement we've already done. So in words, it just says if P, then Q. So if we're given a P and we're given a Q, it's if P, then Q, and then its mathematical notation is right here. Okay, so when I talk about the converse of a statement, I would switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay, I switch the hypothesis and the conclusion. So if this one is if P then Q, here's my hypothesis, here's my conclusion. Well, now all I'm going to do is flip the Q and the P. Okay, so notice I just flip the Q and P, and then here's what it would look like. This will make more sense after we do some examples. All right, the inverse now is when I negate, or negation, of both the hypothesis and the conclusion of the conditional statement. So I'm going to go back to the conditional statement is if P, then Q. Okay, so I'm going to negate both. So it's not if P, then Q, it's if not P, then not Q. And once again, the not symbols are these squigglies in front of it. Okay, and the last one is the contrapositive. And so now we're just going to negate both the hypothesis and conclusion of the converse. So remember, this was if Q, then P. So now it's if not Q, then not P. So not and not. And this will make sense here in a minute when we do examples. All right, let's look at example 4 and kind of put all of those 4 different ones into perspective. So here in our directions, it gives us our P, which I've highlighted in yellow. So P is you're a guitar player, and Q is you're a musician. Okay, so conditional statement is if P, then Q. That comes straight from the diagram in the previous slide. So I could say if, well, guys, our P is you're a guitar player. So if you are a guitar player, comma, then don't forget your if and the then. If you do, it's wrong. Last is Q, which is you are a musician. Okay, so if you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. All right, now let's do the converse. So per that previous slide, the converse now is if Q, then P. Okay, so if, Q comes first this time, so if you're a musician, then you are a guitar player. Okay, now I challenge you to do C and D on your own, at least try it. Pay attention to the squigglies, which just means not, and then we'll be back to go over it. All right, so on C, if P, then Q. Once again, P is a guitar player. Q is you're a musician. I'm sorry, it says if not P, then not Q. Okay, so if you are not a guitar player, then you are not a musician. So that's what you should have got on C. And then D is contrapositive, which is if not Q, then not P. So if you are not, Q is your musician. So if you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. So that's the difference between conditional, converse, inverse, and contrapositive. You'll do several on your homework, and after you do a few, it should kind of sink in and make quite a bit better sense.